Hello and welcome to HCB, where today it is week 22 of the predictions. Hope you all had a lovely FA Cup weekend. I know there was at least 4 teams in the Premier League that did not, but thankfully my one wasn't one of them. We actually had a marvellous FA Cup weekend, if I do say so myself. Fun fact, by the way, week 22, this is the first week of the season where I am reviewing certain matchups for the second time. These are the matchups that I reviewed way back in my first prediction video in week 11. Now, that video was 44 minutes. Hopefully this one will not be as long as that. We start things off with the Friday night game, which is the Carlos Tevez derby as Sheffield United play West Ham. Now, obviously, Carlos Tevez didn't play for Sheffield United, but I'm sure you're aware why I've called this the Carlos Tevez derby. You don't need me to tell you. The last time these two sides played, it was a 1-1 draw at the London Stadium with goals from Robert Snodgrass and Lys Mousset cancelling each other out. This was a time when West Ham, well, at least me anyway, still had a little bit of hope with Pellegrini in charge. Believe me, how we've come a long way since then. Last time these two, in their last meetings, both sides coming off wins. West Ham beating Gillingham 2-0 to temporarily break their League One curse. Meanwhile, Sheffield United beating conference side Fylde 2-1 with a all-changed side. As for the history between the two clubs, I don't mean off the pitch, obviously. Sorry, not the history between the two clubs. The history between the history between them in the league, as in how they've done this so far in the league. I'm not really explaining this well, am I? Don't worry, they'll get better as the 9 matches go on. Sheffield United have won 4 of their 10 home games this season, with their most recent win being Aston Villa in December. Meanwhile, West Ham have won 3 away games this season. However, they have lost. They've only won 2 of their last 5, losing to Palace, Wolves and Burnley as well, coming off bad losses to them. As for this game itself, based on the position of the teams in the league, Sheffield United being 8th, West Ham 16th, should I be going for a Sheffield United win? Probably. Should I be, at the very least, going for a draw? Yes. Definitely. But as a West Ham fan at the moment, I believe that there's a certain amount of optimism around the club. And I believe that we were close to beating Sheffield United the first time round at London Stadium. And they are slightly got a worse record away from home, which is not at home, sorry, I think it's fair to say. And Moyes seems to have got this momentum going for us, which even if it breaks at some point, it's still, I think, in the relative honeymoon period where we could actually go and just play for the manager and play for the club. So you know what, what I should be going for, I'm going to have faith once again in my West Ham side, and I'm going to say we're going to win 1-0. We're going to lose, aren't we? We're going to. Yeah. At least you know. It was slight biased. We now move on to the Saturday games, and the first one is the Marouane Chamakh derby, which is Crystal Palace versus Arsenal. Comment below if you remember Marouane Chamakh. That'd be interesting to see who remembers him. Palace coming off their loss to Derby in the FA Cup. Meanwhile, Arsenal coming off a 1-0 win against Leeds Monday night. The history between the two sides, last time these two sides played, Arsenal and Palace drew 2-2 at the Emirates in October. And fun fact, in their last 6 games, there has been a minimum of 4 goals. The exception. And even in the game before, it was 3-0 to Crystal Palace. Overall, it's been pretty even between the two sides. In the last 10, Arsenal have won more in 5, but there have been 3 draws and 2 wins for Crystal Palace. So it's been pretty even between the two sides, with Arsenal slightly on top. That's a Chris Kamara reference, if you get it. With regards to the form, Arsenal's away form speaks to itself. Only 2 wins away all season, those being against West Ham and Newcastle. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace have got a decent home record, 4 wins from 10, with a lot of points being picked up when they haven't won. As for this game, I believe that Arsenal definitely looked a lot better against Man United. Not so much against Leeds, but against Man United, they were a good side. Well, whether that was just because it was Man United, And the occasion of that game we will see this weekend, but I believe that they will not get the win this week. I believe that Crystal Palace are too much of a good side at home. They're a rigid side despite their injuries. They've shown that this season, and I believe that this will be a close game where Arsenal will just fall short of the win as they usually do against Crystal Palace. I'm going to say this will be 1-1 at Selhurst Park. We now move on to the Gary Cahill derby as Chelsea play Burnley, and this is one of the many derby names where you might not necessarily know, but Gary Cahill apparently did play for Burnley for a little bit, around 29 games on loan there. Chelsea coming off a 2-0 win against Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup. Meanwhile, Burnley coming off a very high-scoring game at home to Peterborough in the Cup, where they progressed to the fourth round. Most of these teams you'd expect to progress to the fourth round relatively easily, unless you've got a Premier League side. Usually, when you get lower league opposition, they do tend to win. Isn't that right, Spurs? Just had to get the insult in for Spurs. We're not even talking about them for ages. Last time these two sides played, it was the Christian Pulisic show as Chelsea ran 4-2 winners at Turf Moor. In fact, in their last 10 meetings between the two sides, Chelsea have won 6 of the meetings, Burnley winning 1, 3 draws. However, Chelsea have only won 1 of those meetings at home. The rest have been away wins, so could that be an indication on how these two sides play? In fact, the last time these two sides played at Stamford Bridge, it was a 2-2 draw, and the time before was the infamous time Chelsea lost 3-2 to Burnley on the opening day of the season as champions. So that is potentially an issue. And another factor into this game is Chelsea's poor home form. They have lost their last 3. They have lost 3 of their last 4 home games to two sides like Southampton, Bournemouth, and West Ham. This is their first home game of 2020 in the Premier League. However, Burnley, on the other hand, are not the best travellers. Burnley, on the other hand, are not the best travellers. They have only got 2 wins away from home all season, the most recent being those coming against Bournemouth and Watford, so sides near the bottom of the league. As for this game, I believe that despite Chelsea's home form, the Burnley side is a bit beaten up at the moment. They're not playing the best football, and I believe Chelsea will break their home record and win this game 2-1. At Stamford Bridge, it's at home. We now move on to the Shane Duffy derby as Everton play Brighton. I struggled for this one. Apparently, Shane Duffy played 5 times for Everton. he was an academy product. All right, close enough. Brighton coming off a loss to Brighton. They came off a loss to Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup. Meanwhile, Everton coming off a 1-0 loss to the Liverpool under-23 side. Sorry, Liverpool at Anfield. Let's be honest, that was the under-23 side. You're cursed in that derby game when that Liverpool are playing people not many people have heard of and still beating you and keeping a clean sheet. That being said, the history between the two clubs, the last time these two sides played, Brighton won 3-2 at the Amex. Obviously, Everton have since changed their manager between those two games. And when it comes to these games, it's pretty even. Brighton have won 2 games. Everton have won 2, and there's been 1 draw in their last 5. For both sides, their wins have come at home. That could be an advantage for Everton. And speaking of home form, Everton, that has been Everton's shining point this season. 5 wins from 10 at home, and 1 draw. So the majority of their points have come at home this season. Meanwhile, Brighton, on the other hand, have not been the best travellers. Only 2 wins from 10 away from home, with many of their losses coming away from home as well. As for this game, I believe that despite Brighton playing well, and they are playing some good football, and especially in their last Premier League game against Chelsea, I believe Everton under Ancelotti have been improving, and they will put their loss to Liverpool behind them and win this game relatively comfortably 2-0. We now move on to that game that ended 9-0 derby as Leicester play Southampton. Leicester coming off a win against Wigan in the Cup. Meanwhile, Southampton coming off a win against Huddersfield, both sides winning 2-0. Now, the last time these two sides played, I think you might remember it. It was the time Leicester won 9-0 away from home. That was genuine. Fun fact, that was the first game I reviewed and slash predicted. What a game to review and predict, honestly. So, what? I mean, where do you start from this? Southampton are probably dreading this day coming, when they will have to play Leicester again. As for Leicester's home form, 7 wins from 10. However, they have recently lost their unbeaten home form, that being a lost 4-0 at home to Liverpool. Meanwhile, Southampton have been decent away from home, especially in recent times. 2 back-to-back away wins recently, coming against Chelsea and Villa, and combine that with wins against Sheffield United and Brighton earlier on in the season. 4 wins from 10 away from home, so not the worst record for a side. To be fair, which is now 12th in the league. That are Southampton. Big contrast since the 9-0. So the real question is, when it comes to this game, will this game, because it's at Leicester's home, will it end 9-0 again? Will they thrash them again? And the answer is no, they're not going to do that. I'll tell you, I'm so confident it's not going to be 9-0. If this game is 9-0, I will do, and this is how confident I am, because I don't actually have the equipment for this. If this game ends 9-0 to Leicester again, I will get the equipment and do a face cam review show. I am not prepared for it whatsoever. That is how confident it's not going to be 9-0. However, despite saying that, Leicester will still win this game. Despite Southampton's upturned form, Leicester are still just playing very good football at the moment, and they've recently come off back-to-back wins in the Premier League when they have played weakened sides. So now, potentially with Jamie Vardy coming back, he could definitely do some damage to the Southampton defence, who probably still has PTSD from Vardy and Jose Perez. So I'm going to say this one will end 3-1. And for Southampton, considering the last result, maybe they'd take that. We now move on to the Mike Phelan derby as Man United play Norwich. Again, this is another one I struggle with. I just want to point out, when trying to find out names for this derby, I found out that apparently David Beckham and Rio Ferdinand had trials at Norwich. Norwich, what the hell did you do wrong to let those two slip through your fingers? Honestly. Man United coming off a draw in the FA Cup to Wolves. Meanwhile, Norwich coming off a win against Preston in the Cup. However, the same can't be said when it comes to wins for Norwich overall this season. They have not won a game since November, when they beat Everton 2-0 away, and they've only won 1 away game all season. I should point out one of the results between and one of, obviously, their home wins this season was against Man United when they lost 3-1, and overall the history between the two sides, Man United have won 7, Norwich have won 2, and there have been no draws. It's another no-draw game. That's the gods of no draw say there can't be a draw between these two sides. There's loads of those no-draw games. And Man United, meanwhile, their home form has been where they have been slightly better. 10 wins, 5 wins from 10, and they haven't lost a home game since August, where they lost to Palace 2-1 at Old Trafford. So that is definitely where they have been better this season. As for this game, despite Norwich upturned form, while the results haven't shown it, Man United overall, they would want to come back from that incredibly atrocious loss in the Manchester derby in the Carabao Cup. I completely forgot, by the way, that happened for the Carabao Cup game. Leicester obviously played midweek as well. Forgot to mention that was their most recent game. But they would want to come back, and I think Norwich is a good side to do it, as considering they are bottom of the league. So I'm going to say Man United will win this game 2-0. We now move on to the Marlon Harewood derby as Wolves play Newcastle. And no, I didn't have a clue that Marlon Harewood played for either Wolves or Newcastle. But you tell me anyone else that played for these sides. Honestly, Wolves have been the hardest team to find derby names for so far this season, honestly. And it's not going to get any better. Wolves coming off a 0-0 draw against Man United in the Cup. Meanwhile, Newcastle broke their recent run of terrible Cup results as they thrashed Rochdale and what's that? Oh, they drew 1-1 and had 4-year-old scores against them. They're now on the replay. Okay, yeah, maybe. Okay, well, never mind. They haven't actually ended their run of poor results. They are still rubbish in the Cups. But as for the history between the two sides, the last two games have ended 1-1. The most recent being at St James's Park. Overall, it's been pretty even in the last 9 results. Wolves have won 2. There have been 4 draws, and Newcastle have won 3. So very even between the two sides. As for the form, Newcastle have won 3 games out of 10 away from home all season. The most recent being a 2-0 win at the early December against Sheffield United. Meanwhile, Wolves have been very good at home. 4 wins from 10, but only 2 losses away from at home all season, those being Spurs and Chelsea. As for this game, I believe that this is Wolves to lose from the simple fact that Newcastle, since they've lost St Maxim, have looked very, very poor, losing their last 3 games. Wolves themselves have lost their last 2, but I believe this is a game where they can take control of their destiny and be rid of those 2 poor results, end up winning this game, and end up winning it very comfortably indeed. I believe that this will be 4-0 to Wolves, and you've got to also remember Newcastle have got so many injuries at the moment. Like, they can barely field a decent starting 11, and they could barely do that at the start of the season, to be honest. We now move on to the Robbie Keane derby, the late kickoff on Saturday as Spurs play Liverpool. Finally, a game that was actually easy to think of the derby name for. Spurs coming off a 1-1 draw against Middlesbrough in the FA Cup. Meanwhile, Liverpool coming off another Merseyside derby win against Everton. The last time these two sides met, Serge Aurier effectively cost Spurs the game, with Liverpool winning 2-1. And I should point out, Liverpool have won the last 4 meetings between the two sides and have won 5 of the last 10. Spurs have only won once in the last 10 meetings between the two sides. And however, what Spurs will be happy is that they are playing at home. At home, they have been slightly better this season. 6 wins from 10, only losing 2 games at home all season, those being to Newcastle and Chelsea. But at the end of the day, Liverpool are the only unbeaten side left. Obviously, they are unbeaten away from home, 8 wins from 9, with the only slip-up being to Manchester United. And soon to be West Ham, of course, when we play them later this month. I'm kidding. I am obviously kidding. As for the game itself, I believe that I'm going to tell you a story quickly. About a friend of mine who said, "You know what? I reckon we could get all 3 points this year." It was the funniest 3 points on Saturday. It was honestly the funniest thing I'd heard all year. And I basically said to him, "Yeah, well, who's your right back?" He said, "Serge Aurier." "Yeah, and who's Liverpool's left winger?" "Sadio Mane." "Ah." And that is why you are not winning. Liverpool, I believe that. And also, you've got to consider the fact that Jose Mourinho has only really played 2 big sides so far in charge. Man United and Chelsea, lost both of them. Oh, and he's also playing Champions League. He's played Bayern Munich, lost that one. He has not beaten a big side yet. And Liverpool is the biggest of the big. They are not going to win this game. They are going to be quite comfortably beaten. They're going to be beaten 3-1 by Liverpool. We now move on to the Sunday games, the first one's the Nathan Ake derby as Bournemouth take on Watford. And I actually had to double check. I had not used this name before. As Bournemouth had played Chelsea. I believe I avoided using that name simply because I didn't do the predictions for that game. So that was quite a relief. I was able to use the Nathan Ake derby for this one. By the way, I have no idea why this is on Sunday either. Anyone? No? Okay. To be fair, it is a relegation battle with two sides that are still in the cup. In Watford's case, technically, where they almost threw away, were 3-0 up against Tranmere. Yes, that is League One Tranmere, and still ended up drawing 3-3 in the end. And also, yes, they were at home. Meanwhile, Bournemouth coming off a win against Luton in the Cup, where Dominic Solanke actually scored against them. Luton, I know I don't do the Championship, but I do follow it. And Luton, you really have to be bad if you're letting Dominic Solanke score against you. The history between the two sides, it was obviously a 0-0 draw last time these two sides played. Despite really contrasting their 3-0 the previous time these two sides have met. There is the no draw god, not in this game. There is the plenty draw god in this one. 7 draws from their last 9 meetings between the two sides. Bournemouth have won 1 as well. Watford have won 1. Both times it's the away side that has won, so you maybe give the advantage to Watford. But you would also give the advantage to Watford in just recent form. They are unbeaten in their last 4 games, and despite only one win away from home all season coming against Norwich, they have also picked up a good draw against Sheffield United away from home recently. As for Bournemouth, only 1 win only 2 wins since November. Admittedly, they were against Man United and Chelsea, so good sides. But their home form has been quite abysmal, really, this season. Only 2 wins from home all season, the most recent being 2nd of November. As for this game, I believe that Watford are playing some great football at the moment, and Bournemouth couldn't be playing worse football if they tried. So you put that together, and this will be a comfortable win, I believe, for Watford, and potentially a definite statement that they can easily stay up. And I believe there's potential, if results go their way, for them to actually get out of the relegation zone this weekend. Could happen, especially if this result goes through. 2-0 to Watford. We now move on to the final game, which is the Fabian Delph derby, as Aston Villa play Manchester City. If I've somehow managed to get any Villa fans to watch my videos, they will not like that name and immediately have turned off. I will say thank you, Villa fans, for staying to the end of this video. That's really helped me a lot. Both sides coming off League Cup games. Villa's being a draw at Leicester, which was actually quite impressive for them. Meanwhile, Man City coming off a 3-1 thrashing of Man United. I know the scoreline doesn't necessarily say it, but it was honestly a complete and utter thrashing. Man United should really feel embarrassed about that game. Like, honestly, really embarrassed. Last time these two sides met, Man City won 3-0 at home at the Etihad and actually have not lost in their last 6 meetings, between the two sides, and Villa have only managed 1 in their last 10 meetings between Man City and Aston Villa. As for City, obviously, their away form isn't necessarily great for the standards they want. Only 6 wins from 10, with 3 wins away from 3 losses away from home this season. But Aston Villa's home record has not. Oh, excuse me. I apologise. Has not been necessarily bad either. 4 wins from 10, most recent coming on Boxing Day to Norwich. As for this game, I believe that this is one where Man City will win. I wish I had more complex analysis for this, but this is the first game since Aston Villa lost their in the Premier League, that is, where they've lost their main goalie and they've lost their main striker. So when your first game like that is against Man City, you're not going to do well whatsoever, let's be honest. And also, this is part of the reason why I don't kind of want Aston Villa to win their semi-final against Leicester, because, let's be honest, we kind of need Leicester to have any hope of City not winning the League Cup again. So that being said, it was 3-0 in the reverse fixture, and I believe it's going to be 3-0 again to Manchester City. So that is all for the games this weekend. We now look at my fantasy team. Well, I've made one change. I've taken out Martin Kelly and put in John Egan for the future, because he's been getting some good goals as well. But I've kept him on the bench in favour of West Ham doing well, along with John Lundstrom. That's probably going to come to backfire. But, have a bit of faith. And if we get thrashed 4-0, the faith will immediately be gone. As for the team, it is Schmeichel in goal, Robertson, Sonucci and Dunk in the back, Traore, De Bruyne, Mane and Grealish in midfield, Abraham, Vardy and Aubameyang up top. Vardy is captain for 2 reasons. 1, hopefully he should be back this week, and 2, they're playing Southampton, where he seems to like playing them. I don't know why. Maybe it has something to do with the 9-0. So that is going to be it for this week's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like, share and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell, and I will see you on Monday or Tuesday. It'll be Monday. It'll be Monday for the review show.